Lucille Ball moved out of Jamestown in 1926, but she never sold the house on Lucy Lane that her grandparents owned. For many years, it was mostly empty, locked, and not used. When the building was torn down last month, workers discovered a secret room full of film frames that weren't marked in handwritten letters from 1952 to 1960. The reels have uncut video from ILoveLucy that was never shown on TV and recordings that Lucille made by herself. Some scenes are shocking and others are just sad, according to people who know about the project. The truth is out, but the family hasn't decided if they will let them go yet. It was August 6, 1911, when Lucille Desiree Ball came into the world in Jamestown, New York. She had no idea how her life would change before she became famous. As a worker for Bell Telephone, her dad had to move around a lot for work. Lucille looked at him with the wide eyes of a child who still thinks everything is okay. Then, when she was only 3, everything broke. On February 28, 1915, typhoid fever took her father's life. Her mom was going to have a baby. Their house went quiet. Lucille didn't remember much. Besides a bird stuck inside the house beating its wings in fear, from that day on. That picture stuck with her, and she has been afraid of birds ever since. It was like the moment stuck in her mind and wouldn't let go. What the family talked about after that loss was how to stay alive. They were always on the move, looking for security that never seemed to last. In the end, they went to Kelleran, New York, and stayed at her grandparents' house on 59, Lucy Lane. It was loud, full of family members, and smelled like food that cost more than the money that paid for it. In every direction, it was working class. Even though her grandparents tried to keep things calm, tragedy struck again when a child's gun accident led to a lawsuit. The house was sold. Lucille saw everything she knew go away again, and her grandfather fell into something he could never get out of. She felt like she was falling behind. Everywhere she went. Through it all, she kept looking for a way out. She was drawn to stages by age 15 and was already looking for school shows. She could already see herself in a bigger role than Celleran. She did routines in front of her family, acting like movie stars and thinking that the applause was coming up ahead. The act became her way out, a way to hold on to the hope that things could be different in her life. She didn't have any money, contacts, or a plan, so the odds were against her, but she couldn't give up. She could breathe better after that dream. If someone had been following her around at that time, the video would have shown a girl who was shy and unsure of herself. Not yet the sure of herself redhead that everyone would love one day. It would show her putting on faces like costumes and turning her living rooms into practice stages. It would show how much she wanted it, even though there were no signs that it would happen. At that time, she was just a normal kid living in a noisy house with big plans she didn't want to talk about. She chose not to wait any longer at age 15. She quit school and went to New York City to try to become an actress. Her friends and family thought it was crazy and risky, but she went anyway. She went to acting school with the hope that it would help her get into the business. Instead, she found being turned down. They told her she was shy and couldn't speak. They couldn't get past her jitters or accent. After a few months, they gave her her money back for the fees and sent her home with a note telling her she was wasting their time. Not being accepted in that way could break someone, especially at age 15. She didn't leave New York, though, because it felt like giving up to do so. She changed herself in order to stay alive. With bleached hair and perfect stance, she changed her name to Diane Belmont and became a fashion model. She wore skirts and coats that were worth thousands of dollars and more than her whole house in Kelleran. It took her a while to learn how to move and hold her head up high, even though she still felt like the girl who had lost everything twice. It made her look more sure of herself, but she was still learning how to feel it inside. Then her body lied to her. She got rheumatoid arthritis when she was 21 years old, and it was so painful that she could hardly walk. A doctor told her that she might need a wheelchair in the future. She was afraid that her dream might fade away as she walked around in 20-pound special shoes. For almost 3 years, she wasn't seen on stages or in workshops. That would have been the end of most lives. It stopped for a moment, but it didn't break. When she was finally well enough to go back to work, she went back to New York in 1935, but this time she was more determined than scared. By 1933, she was getting smaller parts in Broadway choruses and learning how to act without being the center of attention. Bit parts made more bit parts. Her first movie role was in Three Little Pigskins in 1933. Soon after, she made the decision to move to Hollywood for good. She signed with RKO Radio Pictures and tried out for roles all the time. Her parts were mostly in the background, as walk-ons or pretty faces in the corner of a scene. She worked hard all the time but never got credit for it. She was known as the Queen of the B-movies, because she was always working in low-budget movies but never made it big. She worked with trash for a living, but she made every scrap matter. With Too Many Girls in 1940, things began to change. When she met Desi Arnaz on that movie, her whole life changed. She was 28 years old. He was 23. They fell quickly. By November 30, 1940, they had run away to Connecticut. Not a dress or a ring. There was no slow planning, two people just picked each other, even though everyone else didn't agree. People in Hollywood talked behind their backs about their marriage because it broke racial and cultural rules that were rarely seen in public. Their jobs took them in different ways while they tried to build a house. Desi was always on tour. Lucille was always filming. Their plans didn't always work out, and love had to fight for air between shows and hotel rooms. It became normal to be apart. Desi was called up in May 1943. Because of a knee injury, he never saw a battle, but the distance made things hard for them. In 1944, she asked for a divorce, but after one night together, she took it back. For a second time, they tried because they still thought they could connect. But Desi had a hard time with drinking and having affairs. In Hollywood, folks talked about it behind closed doors. Lucille faced it straight on. There was no getting around the pain in the end. Only by it. She really split up with him on March 2, 1960. Desi's birthday was today. The strange thing was that they still thought about each other after they were no longer married. They worked together to make a business. She bought Desi from Desilu Productions and made it a huge company that made Star Trek and The Dick Van Dyke Show, among other shows. They had different lives, but they always cared about each other. In 1986, almost at the end of his life, she called him. She told him she loved him. She thanked him for everything. It was the last moment between two people who had both hurt and healed each other. From 1948 to 1951, Lucille Ball's second act really started on the radio. My Favorite Husband Is Her Show. Became one of the biggest radio stars in the country and ran for 124 shows. The show was based on the stories of Isabel Scott Rorick, and Lucille played Liz Cougar, a housewife who always got into trouble with everyday things. People really liked her timing and how she could make everyday things sound sharp. That's funny. Even though she got along well with co-star Richard Denning, there was still someone missing from that world. And even though Desi Arnaz wasn't in the show, it did well without him, and their real marriage went on in the background. CBS wanted to keep things the same when they chose to move My Favorite Husband from the radio to TV. Lucille wouldn't let that happen unless Desi was added to the list. She said she wanted to play a wife on TV opposite her real husband if she was going to do it. People in charge thought it was a bad idea. They were afraid that people wouldn't believe that a Cuban musician was married to an American redhead. Lilith pushed harder. She told them she would leave if Desi didn't play her husband on TV. They didn't understand what she knew. They're beat in real life. They fought and made up in a way that would make the show seem real. Because she wasn't going to give up, her marriage stayed together for a while, and her job avoided getting stuck in radio. From that fight came the show ILoveLucy, which debuted in October 1951 and slowly changed the way TV shows were made. Lucille and Desi were working on something else behind the scenes. A small company called Desilu Productions was started around the show ILoveLucy in 1950. It was just a cover for the show. However, they refused to take the easy way out when they met with CBS to plan how the show would be made. It was the time when most TV was live and recorded on noise. Barely useful for replays were kinescopes. Something much bigger was what Desilu pushed for. They demanded that the show be filmed in front of a live audience on 35mm film with 3 cameras. It seemed like too much money. It didn't seem important. A lot of people said it cost too much. Lucille and Desi agreed to something that made it happen. In exchange for power, they took big pay cuts. Desi's pay went from $4,000 a week to $2,000 a week. Lucy's lost $2,500 and now has $1,500. In exchange, Desilu got all the film copies and the negative. It looked like a sacrifice at the time. It turned out to be one of the smartest business moves in TV history in the end. When syndication made it possible for ILoveLucy to become very famous, those filmed episodes could be sold over and over again. The reruns brought in a lot of cash. They got millions of dollars from the rights, which made Desilu a huge company. Their use of 3 cameras was a quiet change in and of itself. 3 Mitchell 35mm BNC cameras were rolling at the same time on the ILoveLucy stage. The wide shots were caught by 1 camera, so everyone could see the whole set. As for the medium shots, that person was in charge of most of the activity. A 3rd camera got really close and caught every eye twitch and double tap. The video was sent to an editor who worked on a moviola machine, which is generally found in rooms where movies are cut. Lucy's show looked more like film than rough, flat video. It was clean and crisp. The editing process let them put together the best parts of each performance. The end result was so clean that the shows could be shown over and over again without feeling old. When ILoveLucy became the first comedy to be shown across the country, it set a new standard for how shows should be distributed. Sitcoms with more than 1 camera are still built around that model. Not only did the show change the way TV looked, it also pushed the limits of what TV could show. It's true that Lucille Ball was pregnant in 1952. She and Desi wanted that real life to be shown on TV. They came up with a plot in which Lucy Ricardo was going to have a baby. At the time, a lot of people in TV thought that showing pregnant women directly was inappropriate. Executives were afraid that just bringing it up would make people angry. CBS finally agreed to strict rules. It's against the law to say, pregnant. The characters could only say that Lucy was going to have a baby. The plot felt brave even with this limitation. People watched the show where Lucy gives birth to Ricky in January 1953. More than 44 million people did. In the early days of TV, it was one of the most watched shows. In the future, shows could deal with real-life problems in a mild and funny way after that. There was a secret layer around those well-known events. They made and then put away rehearsal clips, outtakes, early test scenes, and parts that were never shown on TV. Many of these have been lost for a long time, but some have been found in shows like Lucy's Lost Episodes. Fans like to think that there are unmarked cans with scenes that no one has seen since the 1950s. These scenes would show the trial and error that went into making each joke and the constant work that went into improving timing and staging. Those bits and pieces show how much work was hidden under 30 minutes of laughing. Lucy was seen as a happy clown by most people, but there was another story growing up in her past. She signed a declaration in California in 1936, a long time before ILoveLucy, to become a member of the Communist Party and be able to vote. Afterward, she said she did this to show her support for her socialist grandpa, Fred Hunt, who had strong political views and wanted her to do something to please him. She was 25 years old, living in Los Angeles, and still building her business. She was named as a representative on the same paper to the Communist Party's State Central Committee in California. She claimed that she had never been to any meetings, given any money, or done any work for the party. The record of her register stayed up for about 2 years, after which it expired. It didn't seem to mean anything for a while. Then came 1953, when the Red Scare was at its worst. That time when politics in the United States were based on fear and doubt. When the FBI and the House Un-American Activities Committee found her old registration, they began to look into it. J. Edgar Hoover personally told the police to look into it. Lucille's name was put on an FBI watch list at a time when having even a small connection to communism could cause one to lose their job or even die. It couldn't have been a worse time. She was the star of the most popular TV show, and Desilu had big contracts in place because of it. It only took one wrong word or a harsh end for everything to fall apart. Lucy decided to deal with it straight on. In September 1953, she went to WAC on her own to explain what had happened. In her secret statement, she made it clear that she had never planned to vote communist and that she had never given money or gone to party meetings. She said that signing up was just a nice thing to do for her grandpa. She also said she didn't know her name was on the list of delegates to the State Central Committee and that it was put there without her knowledge or permission. The FBI looked into her and found no proof that she had ever been a part of a communist group. Their own records back up her story. The committee cleared her after hours of questioning, and the FBI told her they were sure she was clear. If the story had stayed secret, that might have been the end of it. It didn't. Walter Winchell, a radio analyst, hinted at a story on his national show on September 6, 1953. Even though he didn't say her name, he gave the impression that WAC had called a popular red-haired TV star to question her communist ties. The listeners didn't have to think too hard. The story spread all over the country. I Love Lucy was the most watched show at that time. Any proven ties to communism could lead to a boycott, being put on a blacklist, and the end of Desilu. Lucille remembered that her hands were shaking as she waited to walk onto the set, because she thought the live crowd would boo her or be very quiet. Not only did the scandal put her job at risk, but it also put the other show Desilu created at risk. During this situation, Desi Arnaz did double duty as a husband and a public defender. He went out into the crowd and spoke directly to them when they taped in front of a live audience. He told them that the only real thing they had read about Lucy was her hair. The line made people laugh and calmed them down. To get a straight statement from the FBI, he set up a call with them behind the scenes. Stories that came after say that Hoover himself stated that she was completely clear. The crowd cheered when this guarantee was given. Philip Morris and other sponsors stood by her. Her career survived a blow that could have ended it overnight thanks to a mix of humor, loyalty, and government support. Imagine if someone found a hidden box full of her personal emails, memos, or old newspaper clippings from that time and opened it. The picture might become even clearer. It's likely that those pages would show how scared she was behind the fake smile. After the fact, her daughter Lucy Arnaz Luckenbill talked about how scared her mother had been and how it had affected the whole family. Private notes could show how far apart her public behavior was from the nights she spent worrying alone. They would also show how hard it was for her to deal with a wave of political fear and the steps she took to keep her work and name safe. All of this was going on at the same time that Desilu was expanding into many more areas than just sitcoms. It began in 1950 as a company based on I Love Lucy, and grew into a big studio by the late 1950s. By 1957, Desilu was in charge of the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour and also helped fund big new shows. The Untouchable, which came out in 1959, was one of them. One of the first crime shows to use real FBI files to shape its stories, it stood out. The company went for it all the time. Star Trek was a strange science fiction project that Lucille Ball backed. The network wasn't interested in the first pilot, but she worked hard to get a second one. That determination led to the launch of Star Trek. In 1966. It was the biggest independent TV production business in the world by the late 1950s. It helped get shows like The Andy Griffith Show and Mission Impossible off the ground, and almost every big studio around it copied how it made shows. When 1962 came around, Lucille's work changed again. Desi and her marriage was over, but they were still close because they spent a lot of time together. She paid more than $2 million to get his share of Desilu that year. She got 52% of the stock and was in charge of the company because of the deal. By making that one move, she became the first woman to run a big Hollywood TV studio. She was put in a role that almost no woman had ever held in the industry, and the male executives around her didn't think she could make business decisions at that level. She wasn't trained to be a studio boss. She picked up things as she went. When she owned Desilu, she had to tell people what to do, cut them down, and sometimes fire people she liked. It also meant taking responsibility for every mistake. Her guidance helped bring brave shows to TV. But it cost something. It might be very hard to handle. She worked in front of the camera at the same time. From 1962 to 1968, The Lucy Show aired. People saw her do her usual physical comedy, but behind the scenes, she was also working full-time in 2 other parts. She worked on set for a lot of hours, sometimes 16 hours a day, and then went straight to meetings to talk about costs, schedules, and scripts. People who worked for her said she was tough, demanding, and sometimes scary. She wanted neat work, on time, and no extra work. She missed Desi's business sense and told him that the job was wearing her out. It started to put a strain on her health and personal life. People who worked with that person remember someone who was smart and in charge, but also clearly stressed out by all the expectations placed on them. Once Lucy was over, she moved on to Here's Lucy, which ran from 1968 to 1974. She worked this time with her kids, Lucy and Desi Jr., and then went back with Gail Gordon. Again, the show ran for 6 seasons, and she played a maid for her brother-in-law. The business world around her was already changing at that time. By the 1980s, things had changed in the world of TV. And they had different tastes. In 1986, when she tried to come back with Life with Lucy, it hurt. Before it was dropped, ABC only showed 8 episodes of the show. Some critics were harsh. The audiences did not answer. It was a big failure for Lucille Ball, who used to be the queen of TV. She was ashamed and deeply upset. Friends said she never fully got over that blow to her confidence. As successful as she was and as well known as she was, she carried a big emotional load. She had built a business empire and a brand that expected perfection all the time. Her personal life got more difficult after her marriage ended, and being Lucille Ball became too much for her to handle. In later appearances, she said that she was tired. And sometimes talked about how she felt bad about losing friends and how work had taken over her life. The last big interviews she did show a woman who is thinking about what she gave up for decades of fame and power. If any more behind-the-scenes videos or studio notes from the Desilu years come to light, they will probably show a side of her that people didn't expect to see. The studio head walking through sound stages, not the clumsy housewife who burned dinner and tripped over furniture. Making sure there is enough light, stressing over the numbers, and rushing through talks. The papers and raw reels would show how much stress she was under and how hard she worked to stay in business. They would also stress how tough she had to be to keep going in a field where women were often not allowed to get near that level of power. As her job ended, her body started to give out on her too. She was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles in April 1989 because she was having terrible lung pains. A dissecting aortic aneurysm was found by the doctors. And fixed her artery and replaced a valve in 7 hours of surgery. She walked and ate in her hospital room for a short time, which made it look like she was getting better. Then, on April 26, 1989, a little more than a week after surgery, her abdominal artery burst in a different place. They tried to bring her back to life, but she died at 5:47 in the morning. She was 77 years old. Cystic medial necrosis, a breakdown of the blood vessel walls, was mentioned as a factor in her death certificate. She had been having heart problems in secret for years, and as early as 1984, she was said to have used inhaling drugs called poppers to ease chest pain. Fans who had grown up with her over 6 decades were shocked when they heard of her sudden death. One link from her childhood stayed strong even in her later years. In late 1986, Desi Arnaz died of lung cancer. He had been with her through her marriage and the early stages of her success. It was their wedding anniversary on November 30, 1986, and their daughter Lucy brought him a phone. While Lucille talked from far away, she held the phone to his ear. She told him, "I love you," 5 times in a row. Desi told her he loved her too